All right. Welcome to Amazon Live. D. Scott Smith here. And we're going to have fun today. We have got an author interview coming up with David F. Balrog. And, excuse me. And he's laughing off screen because we were talking about his name, Balog. And so what did I call him? I called him a Balrog. I'll never live it down. That's all right. We're going to have fun talking with David coming up here. And I have got highlighted in the carousel one of my favorite tools of coffee. We're going to do an entire show just on coffee coming up. So I wanted to give you a little preview of what that's going to be. I love the Nespresso machine. I also am a big fan of Turkish coffee. It is hard to find Turkish coffee in the Pacific Northwest. And so I found these great Turkish coffee pods, the Levant brands, with the cardamom in there, infused right into my Nespresso machine and into the little demi-tasse cups. We've got those all highlighted in there. But I have been doing pour over coffee for just the black coffee. And so it's one of these little units. Use one of these, put it right on the cup. My wife does not drink coffee, so it's just me. So I make one cup. Put the filter in, put the coffee in, use it. It is great. Sometimes I run out of filters, and so what do I use? I use the French press. Look at this is a tiny one because, again, I'm the only one that drinks the coffee. So the French press has been great. But for Christmas this year, my son came through big time, and he bought the Chemex. That's this right here. The Chemex. This one uses little square filters that are folded up. They go in here in a little triangle. And here's the crazy thing. I use half the coffee that I do is when I use this little guy. So buy the Chemex and the filters, and your coffee will go twice as far. This is crazy. All right. So I mentioned I am the only one drinking coffee in the house, but my wife likes tea. So right here in Portland, Oregon, just a little north of where I live, is the Stephen Smith Tea Company. No relation, unfortunately, but the teas there are fabulous, and the little bags compostable. So it's a great environmentally friendly tea company, the Stephen Smith Tea Company. Lots of brands, lots of great stuff. We love the bergamot tea. My son loves making the London Fog with the bergamot tea. But what we really wanted to talk about was David Balog's book, The Necromancer's Lament. And so we're going to bring him onto the screen here. And I promise that I will not refer to you as a Balrog, even though I did right off the beginning. David, welcome.
Yeah, Balrog, Balor. I'm one letter away from being two different major demons, so it's I've learned to live with it.
Now, it didn't happen to influence you into writing fantasy, did it?
No, not at all. I was called Balrog before I'd actually read the Lord of the Rings and found out what the Balrog was. My 8th grade gym teacher used to call me Balrog, and I just rolled with it.
Were you a beast on the field? That's okay.
Yeah, I was a bit bigger than most of the other kids at 8th grade, and I actually got in trouble once. We were doing playing street hockey in the gym. Some kid ran into me, bounced off of me, and I got in trouble for pushing him. I didn't touch him. I didn't even move. But yeah, somebody that's a foot shorter than you runs into you know a
There you
a
go.
big kid like me.
Well, welcome to Amazon Live, and we've got you broadcast out to a couple different places. And I'll just remind everybody that if you are watching somewhere other than on Amazon Live, go to amazonlive.com, come on over, and we've got the live chat. So if there are questions that you would like to ask David about his book, then you can type them in right there, and I'll share those with them. It's um, it's a big story you created. You've created your entire world, and as we were talking in the green room beforehand, you created a language around this. I don't know if we want to get into that yet, but this is a monument, and it's only one third of the story that's coming out.
Yeah, Necromancer's Lament came out in October of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was really hard to market anything and to get it out there. Things are finally opening up a little bit. Started doing conventions back in July, so can start meeting people face to face and waving
Mhm.
my book in their face and go, buy it, buy it, buy it. But book two is in second round of editing right now, and I've started writing book three. So
Nice, nice. Yeah,
as soon as
well,
I complete this, the trilogy will be done soon, and then we can do the short story editions, the children's book that one of my fellow authors has pushed me to write, plus all of the other ideas that I have noodling around in this crazy mind of mine.
yeah. Now, it other than the just the beginning intro of the book, it really starts off with a poem. And again, you're telling me that this was something you didn't write this poem for the book. In a
Um,
way, this was well, tell us about that poem right at the very beginning.
the poem was something I wrote about 30 years ago, actually. Yeah, I'm old. And it was it 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 the poem came about, and it's sat for years. And when I started writing the book, it was just little bits and pieces of ideas that I had in my head. I wasn't sure if I was going to be writing a book, if I just wanted to get things out of my head for a little bit. But before long, I realized that things were going to pull together and that I could do a trilogy, and that I figured out what the basic story arcs were going to be for each of the three books. And then it grew, and the more I wrote, the more ideas I got. And just the act of writing made me more creative.
Mm,
Yeah, the poem was called Necromancer's Lament, and I've played a lot of role playing games, D&D, Pathfinder, a lot of role playing games over the years.
yeah.
And this started off. The main character, actually, most of the characters in the book are characters that I've played in D&D or Pathfinder or other fantasy role playing games over the years.
Mhm.
They never interacted until I put the book together. Oh, I wonder how these two would get along.
Mm,
Not well sometimes, but it made things interesting. But that also allowed me to fully flesh out the characters long before I ever put pen to paper.
mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because, uh, I mean, I remember Dungeons and Dragons, late '70s was when I first became aware of that, and actually, it was before that I heard anything about The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, and so it was just kind of an interesting time to let your imagination do a lot of the work
Hmm.
in games.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I'd read The Hobbit about the same time as I was discovering D&D back in '82. Um, '81, I heard of it. '82 is when I finally got the game and started playing it. Actually, I just celebrated my 40th anniversary of gaming. Had a
Ah,
little,
congratulations.
had a little mini tournament for my friends, and
Mhm.
ran an adventure that was older than all of them. Because the adventure was published in '79, and I was the only one old enough to actually play it in first edition rules.
Wow, that's wonderful. And so, really, the journey to Necromancer's Lament started way back, as you said, when you first wrote that poem,
Yeah,
and you never really had an idea to turn it into a book.
no, it was just ideas that I had. The main character was a character that I played back in '89, '90 ish.
Mhm.
Um, and then other characters I played over time. Like I said, I just wanted to see how they would interact as I put the story together. Um,
Yeah.
so there are parts where it does kind of have that D&D feel to it because it
Mhm.
was a big influence on the game and the world building. But
Sure.
having played these games for 40 years, character building, world building, I'd been designing stuff for ages before I decided to put something into book form.
Mhm.
I've been creating worlds for everybody to play with. I've been creating characters for people to interact with. Um, the reason why actually started writing the book is I just finished my master's degree, and after writing all of those research papers, it's a history degree. So after writing all of those research
Wow.
papers,
Mhm.
um, it's like I needed to stop and say, I'm going to write for myself.
Mhm.
Where it
Mhm.
goes, I don't know, but I just wrote 70 pages in 7 days for 3 papers.
Wow.
I need
Yeah.
to decompress, and I'll write fantasy just to throw
Mhm.
stuff out there. And it grew into the book and eventually into a trilogy.
So I'm going to put this up and just remind everybody we are talking with David F. Balog, and his book Necromancer's Lament came out in October of 2020 here on Amazon, and you can click on it, take a look, read a little bit of it. It's a well written book, great story, and one of the great things about this style of book or this genre of book, fantasy, is you can escape into a whole different world in just a very few lines.
Well, thank you.
As you we start off with a poem, and then we get into the story. And I think one of the great things about books, and especially well-written books, is you're able to put yourself into that character's role, right? And maybe this comes from your time in role-playing games, is that people can kind of fit into this character, the opening character where um, you've got uh, maybe a little misunderstood, not quite appreciated, not quite fitting into the molds that were expected. Many of us can identify with that.
Yeah, and the more you say that, the more I realize that I was writing myself and not my character sometimes. But I think we all do that. I think
Mhm.
that's how you make the characters feel real is when you put that much of yourself into those characters. So yeah, the book starts off. The entire trilogy is the memoir of the wizard.
Mhm.
So it's all written from his perspective, and the first book is ages 13 to 17. So we're looking at a lot through the eyes of the teenage ego, a
Mhm.
teenage boy who doesn't know what's going on around him half the time because he's a teenage boy. I didn't know what was going on half the time around me. Um, my friends would say things or do things, and I wouldn't always make the connections as to what other people's relationships were or what people were always talking about. So keeping it in that perspective, that also allows other characters to inform him of things that are going
Mm.
on instead of him just always knowing everything. He thinks he knows everything, but he doesn't.
We
And
we
he's
all
been
did at that
reminded of this
age.
many times.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is. It's just one of those things where you kind of start off, and even his, and I'll just tell people that it starts off with, I'll say, a heroic act. He was prepared. He executed, and even that moment is misunderstood. And so from the very beginning, he's just kind of he's doing good, but it's a little awkward.
Yeah, he does not really fit in with his family well. He's the son
Mhm.
of a blacksmith. He's a scrawny little guy. His younger brother, his younger brother is 5 years younger and is bigger than him already at this point. Almost as tall, but certainly burlier. And of
Mm.
course, his older brother is would be on any football team. And the
Right.
father, um, I people have asked me, it's like, well, if you were casting this for a movie, who would you want to play different characters? And
Wow, great question.
yeah, mostly I would want unknowns to play the characters, just
Mhm,
because I would like to see a fresh take from from younger eyes. But the image that came to me for the father was, definitely have to be like a wrestler, like a Braun Strowman type, somebody big, burly, hairy,
mhm,
overly muscled. Um,
yep,
can be a real sweetheart at moments, but uh, the father character in this has a very short temper, and has a very narrow point of view as to what constitutes being a man and what constitutes being a woman, and that's all there is
mhm,
to it. Um,
sure,
and
yeah,
I find a lot I'm playing the younger generation against the older generation for some ideals, and throughout the series, actually, even in book two, there are times where my characters are doing things that their parents never would have accepted or their teachers never would accept.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, we can look back on, stories from long ago, like Robinson Crusoe, right? Where there was the parents' very narrow view of what their son should do,
Mhm.
and he often lamented that he didn't follow their advice, um, but, we wouldn't have a story if he did. But there's always this generational pull, and that's 300 years ago. So uh, you're following in a good tradition.
And I kind of dove into that also. Whereas being the son of a blacksmith, I figured I needed to understand blacksmithing a little bit more. Um, and even though my main character Mithran doesn't necessarily realize it, he still uses a lot of idioms that would deal with smithing.
Ah,
He'll use an epithet that does something about that says something about blacksmithing, like something about heat and iron or something. He ends up using a lot of spells that use a lot of iron, but he doesn't realize just how ingrained that is with him.
mhm.
But to understand it better, I actually took some blacksmithing classes shortly before COVID hit and shut down the forge. The sword that you see behind
Yeah.
me
Hmm.
was something that I did in those classes. It's not a super well crafted sword. I certainly didn't have the time to fold the metal and make a beautiful piece or anything. But yeah, uh, for basic coursework, I think it looks pretty good.
I was noticing that when we first came on and we were in the green room there was the sword that he had there, and I'm glad we got the story behind that. And doing research for a fantasy book, I will say, is probably unusual. A lot of people will do it for true historical fiction or for nonfiction works, but actually enrolling in a class and heating the metal and swinging the hammer yourself, that's a commitment to the story.
There's nothing like having the experience of hammering metal, and it's exhausting. when when
Uh-huh.
when you're looking at a blacksmith from those days, you're up from sunrise to sunset. You're working in the forge, you're hammering metal, you're making tools for the villagers or whatever. For a 3 hour class, you know, I, you know, the first 2 hours are pretty good. After the third
Mhm.
hour, it's like, I can barely swing this hammer anymore. It's not even worth me trying to pound the metal because I'm not getting an edge. I'm not spreading the iron at all. I'm not
Mhm.
putting anything behind these blows. It can be tiring.
Yeah, so if, somebody would like to do a little research on their own, go down to your local gym and get yourself a 5-pound kettlebell and just raise and lower it, quickly for a couple hours, and you'll get
Yeah,
an idea.
pretty much. Yeah, take a few moments rest as you're putting the iron back in the fire. So give yourself 2 minutes, then go back and lift that kettlebell for 2 3 minutes straight. Give yourself 2 3 minute break. Go back and forth with that for 3 hours. That's working iron.
Yep. So there you go. You might be the overly muscled father Smith in the story, and yeah, I think some of those views that we get like that is it's what has worked in the past, and this is I know maybe there's not an analogy in the story, but I think we see that a lot that what used to work isn't going to work today or isn't going to work for you and we need to take that opportunity to change, even though it might be against some of the long-standing traditions that have come into our families and in our culture.
Yeah, because he doesn't work well in the forge because he's not that strong. He doesn't have the endurance. He can do some of the minor tasks, even those he's not great at. He understands the concepts, but just doesn't have the physical ability
Mm,
to really do the work well. And he takes up with the village herbalist, who ends
mhm,
up saving his life early on in the book to show why he's so connected to her. But according to his father, herbalism is a woman's job, and therefore he shouldn't be doing it. Um, and the herbalist introduces him to the wizard that becomes his teacher, who is also
mhm.
a woman, and his father isn't happy about that situation either. That a man should be taught by a man, and wizard stuff, magic stuff. That's nothing for a village boy. That's something for the aristocrats to be doing.
Mhm.
So he's breaking all kinds of norms for his village.
Yeah, so he is an unlikely wizard.
Yeah, never thought about it, never considered it as an option, but this wizard sees something in him that he didn't know that he possessed, and
Mhm.
takes the time to train him. And
Yeah.
then then it's his experiences learning magic, and I really wanted to focus on his apprenticeship. Many
Mhm.
fantasy books that, oh, you're somebody becomes a wizard, and next chapter, oh, they're a great wizard. It's 30 years later, and now they're
Mm,
doing all this
mhm,
big magic stuff. I wanted to focus on him learning the magic, figuring things out, meeting other apprentice wizards,
mhm.
and watching him develop as a person, not just, oh, now I'm this wizard and I can cast all these great powerful spells and nothing's a challenge for me anymore. That's not fun to write. That's not fun to read.
Mhm. Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just gonna remind everybody we're talking here on Amazon Live with author David F. Balog and his book Romancer's Lament. And this is a significant story as you were talking about this apprenticeship and really focusing on that. It is again, it's the hero's journey where
Mhm.
he goes from being unappreciated and he becomes and so he is not seeking after being a wizard or kind of having the prestige maybe of it. I think back to the movie Willow, and Willow wanted to be a wizard more than anything, and so we kind of follow him on his journey there. But here, he's unlikely. This comes to him, and he decides to accept.
Yeah, it's the opportunity is there, and he thinks about it and went, um, it sounds interesting, and he's like, "Do you really think I could possibly do this?" And
Mm,
his teacher insists that he has a lot of potential, so he takes her up on it. It's like he'll never make a good blacksmith. Um, you know, he still likes herbalism, but the possibility of learning magic is just too intriguing for him.
Yeah. And as you were writing this, you were telling me too that you've created an entire language around the magic.
Oh,
So this is a very integral part of your story.
yeah, because when I was first writing everything out, I would just write down what the spell does. That's oh, they're fighting this monster, and he lobs a fireball or a lightning bolt or something. That's that's kind of boring, and it feels very much like like you're reading a Dungeons and Dragons cartoon instead of reading a novel. So I created a whole language for magic. I put the root words in the back of the book and some basic syntax. One of my fellow authors wants me to do it as a full conversational language. I will
Mhm.
probably get to that at some point. It'll be my magical version of Klingon.
I was
But,
just gonna say.
I'm not at that point yet. I can't focus on that at that point. I need to finish the story before I start doing all
Mhm,
of the little ups and extras. But having the having all the root words in the back, so you can actually look up the spell and see what the spell actually means. So, you know, Shortcack Ball shows up in the book, and I describe everything in text, so you don't have to look it up. But if you
mhm.
want to geek out like me, you go to the back of the book and say, "Oh, Shortcack means fire. Balmos means explosion. Fire explosion." Okay, yeah, that fits the
Ah,
description in the text.
mhm.
Big boom boom.
And so, obviously with Dungeons& and Dragons, you create a world of, but, very simplified compared to what you had to do in Necromancer's Lament. Tell us about the world and the peoples and what is going on
The
there?
the world is your basic medieval society, and uh, this is where I get to use my history degree. Is developing a medieval society, researching villages, researching cities, how the society worked at that time, and then but if you add magic to it, and then you're adding in that it's not just humans; that they're also Xylans and Gromolds and Talali and other different ancestries involved. How would that society change? How would that society shift? Um, Mostly I'm focused on the wizards and not only the magic itself, but the philosophy of magic and why it's important, why it works, why can't everybody use it, or can everybody use it and they just don't know how. There's a lot of discussion in that. There's a lot more character development and character driven storylines than there are actually the plot driven aspects. There are things that push the story forward, but I really like to focus on the characters and allow them to explain the world as they're just
Mm.
having conversations. They can be sitting around the campfire chatting about things, and you know I'm doing exposition. In a
Uh,
not boring way where it's like 400 pages later, oh, we finally get to meet the characters. No, 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 no.
mhm, right. So how do you, just as a writer, tell us about the process of writing. So obviously you had the poem for a long time. You finished your master's degree and decided, okay, this is a good time to do some writing on my own. And um, tell us about your journey as a writer from that time till when you actually got to see the book published.
Ah, the writing of it was chaotic to say the least. There's a lot of debate between plotters and pantsers, and apparently I'm a pantser to another degree. I wrote chapter 9 first, chapter 4 last. And there's 15 chapters in the book. I like longer chapters. They average about 6,500 words per chapter.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
I could break them down smaller, but I just felt like that told the story better, is to
Hmm.
keep things kind of at that level. But it started off, I was just writing the ideas down. I'd written the first couple pages of chapter 1 maybe, then a few later things, but chapter 9 was the first chapter I actually finished. And then I went back to chapter 1. Chapter 1, 2, and I probably bounced ahead back and forth. Um, I follow my muse. Whatever my muse tells me I need to write this particular day, that's what I write. If I need to finish this chapter and then go on to something that's going to be 7 chapters later, then that's where I write. It's
Yeah.
whatever I feel comfortable doing. I don't force myself to do things in order. Um, but what I have learned uh, is when you're doing that, if you're doing a lot of back and forth like that, if you write something in an earlier chapter that reflects off of something from a later chapter, immediately go back to that later chapter, make sure that the continuity is there, make sure that if you've changed anything or if you've added anything, that gets put in. Um, because I found early on I missed a couple of those, and I was able to go back and change some of those before printing. But with book 2, I had a much easier time with the continuity, so I wasn't looking ahead and going, "Oh yeah, I did this," but 100 pages later, I contradicted myself. I said, "No, I got to fix that right now before I forget all
Mm-hmm.
about
Yeah. I know there's in the Sherlock Holmes stories, Conan Doyle would often be writing in restaurants, and sure enough, his character it would be a bright sunshiny day, and he'd step into the rain,
it."
um,
Yeah,
because he was distracted and
checking
didn't
those.
have that.
I got to pay attention to the lunar phases because also like 3 days later, it's a new moon, but it was a full moon in the
Mm,
previous chapter. Keeping track of the seasons, keeping track of how long of a horse ride is it to go from this village to this village. But you can always fudge that because I'm not spending all 4 days necessarily riding. Could be stopping at another village that I could make it from here to here in 4 days, but really it took 6
mhm,
because I wasn't in a
yeah.
hurry. Um, and there's a lot of conjured horses in here because an actual horse takes a lot of time and effort to take care of. So it's a lot easier to just summon one through magic, and then when the spell ends, it goes away. And you don't have to feed it, you don't have to care for it.
Mhm. Yeah, there are some things when you are creating the story, you get to decide.
Mhm.
Um, and you get to make some of those things up. Some things that might be just convenience. So
Yeah,
conjuring a horse, good. Now we can just put it
yeah.
away.
Yeah, this way I don't have to learn so much about horseback riding.
That's right.
That I,
And I'm a big
I
fan of history myself, and I'm just fascinated by uh, how you would have put this together based on your actual research of what it was like to be in the medieval world, and then you were able to enhance it, and of course, make some concessions with conjuring horses and so forth. Um, uh, Tell me a little bit about the actual medieval world and how it might compare to what we would find in Necromancer's Lament.
Yeah, well, your typical medieval village. I mean, mostly a lot of people were pretty much left to their own devices. There was the king in his castle, and he had his knights and his barons and the strata all the way down. But by the time you really got to the village area, unless the knights had to rally people to defend the realm, or it's time for tax collection. So you start collecting food and whatever goods that the village produces. Villages are pretty much left to themselves because there's no need to completely micromanage it.
Mhm.
The royalty doesn't have the time or the inclination to do it, as long as they get their stuff at when it comes time for taxes.
Mm, mhm.
So, having a small farming village, the houses would be spread apart so that there's a lot of land to work. In order to have the tools, you need a village blacksmith, usually a village herbalist to help care for the wounded, who acts as the medic, acts as the midwife, acts as the hospital. A lot of people just growing personal gardens for themselves and then growing crops for the kingdom. Um, other small professions, a lot of things done in the house. The mother spends a lot of time, um, where she's like weaving blankets or
Hmm.
sewing or whatever, because you make your own goods because you don't have access to manufactured goods as we do in a more modern society. So you had to be
Hmm.
self-sufficient. If you wanted leather goods, then you hope that's either in your village or in a nearby one. There's somebody who can make leather goods, who knows how to tan the leather. Um, if you want honey, then you need to have a beekeeper, which is always useful for the crops anyway. So there's
Hmm.
usually one in town somewhere, and you have the honey, which you can turn into mead, which you can, and you can also use
Absolutely.
you can also use those sugars in the food to sweeten things.
Hmm.
Um, so I just looked at all those little aspects and it's like, all right, this is a small village. These are the basic jobs that people will have here. Um, and then, what happens when a wizard passes through and goes, you have magical ability. I'm gonna take you to my tower and teach you. And then, you know, what happens? What happens afterwards? Yeah, the village will go on without you. But what
Hmm.
happens to you is completely out of the blue, completely different, eye-opening, world-expanding experience. And that's what I wanted from my character, is to see that there's just so much more than he ever thought there was.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the things that just having done some study and research on the 19th century, it seems like modern medicine is a wonderful thing, by the way,
Mhm.
and sanitation. And when I was studying in about the 19th century, death was at everybody's elbow. I mean, there was
Mhm.
always, oh, where's John? Oh, yeah, he's dead. Oh, okay. It was just part of that. And I'm sure that it wasn't any better in a medieval neighborhood.
No, not at all. I give a little bit more for the herbalism, and I did do some study and research in that too, as to what herbs would be available, what medicinal qualities many of them would have, just to have a small database to work with. Um, so yeah, there's garlic and birthwort and other things that would be around and useful for the environment that I built from. And whatever tweaks that I wanted to, and creating a few others of my own, because
Mhm.
I need something like this, and that's not going to exist in the real world. And if it does, nobody would realize it because nobody would need it for that.
Mhm. I'm just gonna remind everybody again, we are talking with author David F. Balog, Necromancer's Lament. This is a fabulous fantasy story, an entire world, and a full language. Well, a big language around magic. And everyone, I'll say, don't we all want to be wizards?
um, until you realize what it could cost. And in his particular case, well, and especially as the trilogy goes on, without giving spoilers, um,
Hmm.
the titles of the trilogy are Necromancer's Lament, Necromancer's Sorrow, and Necromancer's Grief. Um,
Mm,
let's just, without giving anything away, it's probably not going to have a happy ending.
hmm. Yeah.
um,
Well, I think we can get that in the poem from the beginning,
oh, yes.
that that there's some societal angst against the wizard, but there is some self-sacrifice, and we can definitely appreciate that. But there's self-sacrifice because what the wizard is trying to do is protect other people, even at his own expense.
Yeah, and that's a big key. Is he wants to do the right thing, and sometimes doing the right thing requires some sacrifice.
Hmm.
Um, did you want me to read the poem?
I was gonna say this would be a good time to hear from you, David.
All right, got to put my reading glasses on because look, the LASIK was great for years. I had 14 good years of near perfect vision. Then,
Mhm.
yeah, over time, I got older, and my brain is still trying to figure out, because I was nearsighted for so long. Now I'm starting to get a little farsighted. My brain is still It's like, wait a minute, that used to be blurry here. Now it's blurry here.
That was one of the reasons why I didn't get LASIK is that my friends all ended up having to have reading glasses. I'm like,
Oh, but
so I'm either going to get
considering,
them for the distance or up close.
yeah, considering the thicker glasses I had and having to change the contacts all the
Yeah.
time and buy new contact lenses, LASIK was great.
Hmm.
When we got it, my wife joked, "It's like, well, come the zombie apocalypse. Do you want to take the time to put in your contacts, or do you want to be able to see the zombie so you can run away from
There you go. There you go. There's a great solution right there. All right.
it?"
We're going to have David read the poem right at the beginning of Necromancer's Lament.
Let me take a little sip of water first
Of course,
because I
stay
don't want it to
hydrated.
dry out. Always important to stay hydrated. Alrighty. I understand your squeamishness, the natural feel of dread. You may think it is demonish to animate the dead, but truly 'tis a sacrifice that I make for my art. For greater would you pay the price should I not do my part. The dead I've learned to animate, in pieces and in whole, so that my skills may calibrate the taking of the toll of the spells which draw from plains rife with strength beyond your ken, where shadows live and death survives. You would not comprehend. Talking skulls and a walking corpse, the basics of my art, used so that I might find the force to take them all apart. I pull strings from the tapestry to fray apart the weave and rend the spell of travesty of magics ill conceived. Destroying creatures such as these is verily my goal, so that the dead may rest in peace. I've lost part of my soul.
Yeah. So it is the lament.
Yeah. The there are numerous undead that travel through here, and yeah, I've tried to expand beyond zombies and vampires and all of the fun ones that are popular in modern media right now.
Hmm.
Um, and I've renamed a few things, and then from that point rebuilt things to better suit my story and my world. So I'm not just using your basic your basic vampire or zombie or whatever.
Hmm.
But you know, early on, as a child, he's attacked by a couple of undead creatures and barely survives, and that's when the village herbalist saves his life. And he's
Hmm.
hated the undead ever since. So when this wizard comes and wants to teach him necromancy, which is traditionally used to create undead, he balks at that. When she explains to him that by knowing how to create something, you learn how to better take it apart. That's where
Yes.
he really gets intrigued and went, oh, so if I learn how they're put together, I learn how to destroy them more easily.
Hmm.
Yes, that's what I want to do. I want to destroy all of the undead.
Yeah.
But in order to learn those positive aspects of it, you have to learn the darker side of it first. And it's finding that balance and trying to maintain your integrity and your morality while you're doing things that you know are otherwise
Hmm.
wrong. In order to, it's like I have to learn this so that I can be a better
Mm.
person later.
And that was my question was what's the risk of being pulled not to be helpful, but to be a um, a wizard that's dangerous?
Yeah, and I talk about that in the forward a little bit too. It's a one page, just a little one page prologue.
Hmm.
I know some people don't like them, and yes, sometimes there's too much exposition in the prologue. But I just did a single page to give an introduction to the main character, so you can better see what you're coming into.
Hmm.
And he talks about that some wizards are more interested in power, some are interested in the art of creation, some are interested in being destructive, some want to gather wealth through their magical abilities. And and he's trying to figure out what is it that he really wants to be, what is it he would like to do with his magic, and what kind of person is he going to be as he learns this. And and, and says, well, I have to, I will do my best to be the best person I can be, but it's, there will be a cost to it. And I understand that, and I'm willing to pay
Mm,
that price
right.
in order to do what needs to be done.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think we again see that from the very opening where he's done some preparation, is able to help his brother, and so you kind of get his character from the beginning, and so you're always going to pull for him and not get
Yeah,
pulled in.
yeah. Even when he does stupid stuff. Because he's a teenage boy, he's going to do stupid stuff.
Yeah, yeah. That's why we love to reread stories because we think maybe he'll make a better decision this time. Nope.
Oh, oh, yeah. The wording hasn't changed, but has he learned the lesson in book 2
Mm,
to not make
mhm.
that mistake again that he made in book 1?
Yeah. So, you mentioned that the second of the trilogy is in process, and anyone that writes a book like this, especially as complex as this, you're certainly not going to be doing this on your own. And you mentioned your editor really prominently in the book and the listing here on Amazon, which I think is wonderful because
Because she takes
editors
so much
are the
work to make
hidden.
this, cleaning up the language, making the story better. I mean, I did everything within my power before I sent it to her.
Hmm.
Once I had finished writing the book, then I had to look for a publisher, and that was a 2.5 year journey on its own. Um,
Hmm.
just submitting here, submitting here, submitting here. Taking the rejections, taking the no responses, and there were a
Hmm.
lot of no responses. But the rejections were always positive. It's like, oh, we think you have a good story and a good writing style, but we don't think you'll make enough money for our company, so we're not gonna publish you. Okay,
Hmm.
well, at least that's encouraging that they like it. It's like, but it's just not. It's not. We don't think it's going to sell 1 million copies.
Hmm.
Okay, I mean, sure, I would like to be a millionaire. Sure, I would like to be the next Stephen King or the next big thing with the big movie
Hmm.
contracts or the Netflix deal or whatever. Um, and I think a lot of authors would like that because that's where the money
Hmm.
is.
Sure.
Merchandising. uh, but and then eventually I got to Rock Hill on my list. That Rock Hill Publishing wasn't on the early list that I was looking at, and then I came across them and went, well, all right, I'll send it to them. They do fantasy work, and they
Hmm.
said, ooh, we like that. Send us more. I
Oh,
sent them more. I
nice.
said, send us the rest. I send them the rest. Um, yeah, here's a contract. Great.
It is not uncommon when have talked to other authors that they say in many cases it can take a year or two just to find an agent if you're going that route for large publishing houses, and 1 to 2 years plus uh, to find a
Mm.
publisher. And so you're kind of like right in there with that.
Yeah, I was to the point because I considered an agent. I went, well, there's a lot of places that are taking submissions. I will do that on my own. Some of them only took agented submissions. I went,
Hmm.
all right, I'll put those on my list. And if I can't do it on my own, then I will look for an agent. And
Hmm.
I was at the point of researching agents when Rock Hill came over to me and said, no, we like this. I went, oh, okay, I guess I don't need an agent. I got in.
Yeah. Well, that's fabulous. And writing groups, writing support groups, and so forth. Did you participate in those as you were going through the writing
um,
and editing? And
Actually, no. I discovered one, but because I was busy with other things, busy with
Mhm.
work, busy with other activities. It's like, well, I could go, but they're on the same night as something else I was already doing regularly. So,
Mhm.
well, if I've got the free time, I will try to go. Actually, I just recently joined one. I will be going to my first meeting with them next Thursday, I think. So I'll be meeting most of these people for the first time, but and
Okay.
yeah, it's something that it's always sounded like a good idea. It's always sounded like, "Oh, this will be fun. It'll be get some direct
Mhm.
feedback from other people." But, I just I it just slipped away from me. I just never got to it. But
Mhm.
it always seemed like, this would be a positive thing for my writing. But
Yeah.
and again, the 2 years looking for a publisher, I was editing my work and cleaning it and polishing it to the best I could. So by the time they got it, Athena didn't have to do nearly as much work on my book as I was afraid she was going to have to. I was afraid to see big red lines cutting out entire paragraphs or rewrite this
Mm.
chapter or just and it's like, oh no, let's do a word change here. Let's move this sentence over here. We'll fix the punctuation here, so that should be an M dash. That that's it. I gave you that good of a product
Mm.
that's all you really had to do to me.
Yeah.
Woo!
And as we're starting to wind down, I just want to ask on your storyline, when you start writing, do you have how much of it is in your mind ahead of time, and how much of it transpires during the writing process?
Most of it transpires during the writing process.
Ah,
Uh,
uh-huh.
the major beats, I'll usually have like a page of notes of these are the major beats. These are the things that I would like to write up in the book. Some of those don't make it into the book anyway, but I
Mhm.
get some of the major ideas out, and again, that's part of my pantser writing is that I'll look at that beat and go, oh, let me write that section of the story. Let me write this section, but usually things evolve on their own. There are a lot of times that the characters surprise me, doing things, saying things that I hadn't intended. Um, you know, I've killed off characters because the story demanded it, not because I was trying
Mhm.
to kill my darlings. Um,
Yeah.
some of them die because of that. Some of them die because the story went that direction without me planning for it. Um,
Mhm.
I've had character relationships that I hadn't planned for, and that sometimes it takes a character to tell me that
Yeah.
something else is going on that I didn't know it either because I was I'm so into writing from the perspective of my main character that I don't know what's going on sometimes.
So we've got book 2 and then 3 of the trilogy here, and of these characters, is there one that might become a spin-off and have, a story, book or series,
I'm
of
working
their
on a
own?
series of short stories. Again, since everything's written from Mithran's perspective, I'm working on a group of short stories from other characters' perspective, so that they can each have their own. The children's book is going to be a spin-off from one of the characters from book two that
Mm, mhm.
what wasn't there in book one yet, and it's going to be sort of my Alice in Wonderland. It's her story growing up before her mind gets fractured. In book two, she definitely has some issues and isn't always part of this reality. And
Mm,
I feel like I need to do a deep dive into her before that happens,
yeah.
and and show her story. But I feel that that will work as a children's book. That I can write that, like I said, as my Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah. I'm going to put this cover back up. I want everyone to see because we are speaking with David F. Balog here on Amazon Live. If you're watching anywhere else, come on over to amazon.com/live and join us here. Necromancer's Lament is David's fantasy book. It is an immersive story, well written, great gift. Click on it, take a look, read a little bit of it, add it to cart. Uh, we all need a little bit of escape sometimes. And a wonderful story like Necromancer's Lament is something, and you get to look forward to it because there's more books coming out. And if you want to share with your kids, got the kids' versions coming as well. And I just want to put this back up so we can see the cover here. And uh, last part about the book
Mhm.
is the cover. Tell us about designing the cover and how you came to that.
Oh, I met my cover artist through a mutual friend, and actually, my cover artist and his brother did the artwork that's on the wall behind me. Um,
Ah,
my wife always wanted to have like a stained glass thing, so they just drew on just regular sheets of paper. There's the owl on this side, and I'll move this slowly so I'm not getting vertigo for
there
anybody.
you go.
It's
Yeah.
a dragon on the other one.
Hmm.
My wife wanted the dragon, I wanted the owl. So they took the drawings that they did, broke them up to give them a stained glass look, and then translated that from a notebook sized page to the about 2 foot by 4 foot frames that I had
Mm.
on the wall. Uh, Sketched it all out, then did the stained glass, and they just drew the black lines, and then my wife and I treated them as like giant coloring books. um, but but,
Nice.
but the cover itself is Mithron and Glitter. Glitter is my secondary main character, but the story is told from Mithron's perspective. The owl is his familiar. She's much more than a pet. They converse. He learns to see through her eyes. That they're soul bonded. So they're almost as a single individual in two
Hmm.
bodies. But uh, in the story, when Mithron and Glitter first meet, he unintentionally embarrasses her, and then later on through the book, they're forced to work together. So the cover is the two of them having to work together, but he's looking over his shoulder, trying to apologize to her, and she's looking over her shoulder like, I hate this guy, but I need to work with him right now because we have a mutual goal. The moon dagger symbol is Mithran's personal symbol.
Hmm.
It represents the peace and wisdom of the moon, overriding the violence of the dagger whenever possible. Um, to the extent that, so if I can get a good angle on here, I yeah, I can get my
Get you
arm in the
there.
right position. There we are.
There you go.
Um,
Hmm.
I I had that symbol added to myself.
Hmm.
uh,
There's a commitment to art, to your art.
yes. And also as a constant reminder, peace of the moon over the violence of the dagger.
Mm, yeah.
I drive for a living. Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
don't make enough money off of my books yet that I can write full time. So I
Hmm.
still have my 50+ hour a week job, and sometimes I need to remind myself to slow down,
Hmm.
relax, and don't get mad at the guy who just cut me off.
A good reminder for all of us. Hey, you talked about being able to get out and do some shows, some book shows, some different events. Tell people where they might find you and how they can get a hold of you. Maybe have you speak or share, or maybe they want to buy boxes of books to be able to give to their friends.
Please
So,
do. I live in Northeast Ohio. I just heard back from another con this morning. I'm trying to remember because I've got a list of ones that I've applied for, but
mhm.
one that's in the Youngstown area in May. It's Ohio Fan Fest, I believe, and it's May 13th and 14th. Um, I will be at one in Columbus. I've applied for a couple of them in Indianapolis, just to kind of stay in the Midwest.
Mhm.
But the first con I did was Comic Palooza in Houston, and I've applied for
Okay.
that one because I would like to go back to that one. That was a lot of
Mhm.
fun, and that
Yeah.
was just when things were starting to open up again. So, Comic Palooza at that time was only 40,000 people, and they were only using half the space that they normally do, because they were still trying to keep things a little bit contained. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping this year that things will really open up.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. And how can people get a hold of you?
um, uh, uh, my website is my name, davidfbalog.com. I have all of my social media listing on there for Twitter, Instagram. On Twitter, I'm Mithron Shade. Um, Instagram is again my name, David F. Period Balog. But again, that's all on
You
the
are your
website.
character. That
I
is
am my
your
character.
wizard name, Mithron. Yeah.
So yeah, I got to be me, and my character has to be me too. It's
Yeah. Yep, yep. Oh, I love it. Well, David, it has just been so much fun talking with you about Necromancer's Lament, and the next book is coming out sometime. People,
hopefully by this fall. My plan is for October, but that all depends on you know you know it's in my editors and my publisher's hands now. It's out of mine, so I don't control the timelines there.
all right. Well, get more good information for aspiring authors that want to learn the process a little bit. So, David, thanks for joining us and sharing the world of the Necromancer's Lament and all the magics that's in there. We all want to be wizards and do good and help people out. So, um, thank
Thank you
you.
so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, good, good. I'll send you to the green room and then we'll sign off, but hang out. We'll see you in just a moment.
Alrighty, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Hey, isn't that fun? An entire world created and a great story, eh, well written book. And fantasy is a great book to have, great genre. And I encourage you, click on the book, add it to cart. Right here on Amazon, you can send it to somebody. Put their address in, send it right to them, and give them the gift of fantasy, something that is not cliche. It's brand new, relatively new, about just over a year out. And then read that one. Be ready this fall for the second in the trilogy from David Balog for joining us. And with that, we're going to sign out and just say thank you for joining us here on Amazon Live and have a fabulous day.